What if everything you've ever asked for has already been answered? What if there was no delay, no pending queue in the sky, no celestial ledger tallying your worth before releasing your desires, but instead, a sacred law always in motion, whispering quietly behind the noise of doubt? This isn't a question meant to inspire blind hope. It's an invitation to remember a truth buried so deeply under teachings of effort, worthiness, and waiting that we've forgotten its power. You were never meant to beg for your life. You were meant to recognize that your asking has always been heard, always been honored, and always been responded to. Not later, but now. But how? How could something feel so unanswered when your longing is so loud? How could life seem so silent when your prayer was so sincere? Because the universe doesn't answer with words. It answers with vibration. And vibration, unlike words, isn't delayed. It's immediate, instantaneous, and mercilessly honest. It bypasses pretense and cuts to the core of your state. It does not respond to what you wish to believe. It mirrors what you actually hold within. Pause for a breath. Let that in. If that's true, then the issue has never been the asking. The issue is that we forgot how to listen in the right frequency. We've been shouting into a field that doesn't speak English. It speaks energy. So when you ask, the answer is already forming. Not in words, not in logic, but in reality bending around your emotional blueprint. And that means your deepest desires are not random. They are echoes. Echoes of something ancient, something sacred, etched into your being like a signature of the divine. When you feel that pull, that longing, it's not temptation. It's memory. It's the original vibration of your soul trying to make its way back to form. So no, this audiobook won't give you 7 steps to attract money or 10 affirmations to find love. It offers something quieter and more powerful. A remembering, a shifting, a knowing that returns you to the original law. Not the one written in Scripture, the one written in your essence. And in this remembering, something begins to stir. Not outside, inside. You are not broken. You're simply disconnected from the frequency that already carries everything you've asked for. You don't need to shout louder. You need to become still enough to hear, still enough to match the answer already waiting, still enough to let go of effort and fall into alignment, still enough to walk with a kind of peace that says, I already know it's mine. So ask again. But this time, don't throw your desire upward like a wish. Whisper it inward like a choice, like a birthright, like a vibration you are ready to carry. You are not here to prove your worth. You are here to receive as one who remembers. So, if you're listening to this right now, maybe it's no accident. Maybe it's 2 a.m. where you are, or noon, or just the hour when you finally had enough of wondering why things haven't arrived. Wherever you are, type it below. Declare it. Witness yourself in this moment. Because this moment isn't just where your story continues. It's where the answer begins to breathe. And as the quiet returns, you feel it. The beginning of the shift. Because the echo of that forgotten law has finally found its voice again. In you. And as you soften into that truth, something even more ancient rises to meet you. Not outside, but within. And now that you've remembered the law, the next question becomes, what are you truly asking for? Desire was never the enemy. You were taught to fear it, to bury it beneath obedience, to shame it into silence. You were told that true spirituality meant asceticism, self-denial, and detachment from the world's longings. And so, over time, you began to equate desire with danger, as if wanting more made you less holy, as if yearning disqualified you from grace. But what if desire is not temptation, but communication? What if every longing in you is actually a divine signal? Not a test of restraint, but a call to rise. Desire is not greed. It's not lack. It's instruction. It is the sacred blueprint encoded within your soul, revealing the path your next becoming wants to walk. You don't ask just with your mouth. You ask with your ache, with your daydreams, with the shiver that runs through you when you imagine more. When your chest tightens at the thought of joy beyond your current reach, that's not fantasy. It's a frequency, reminding you of the life that's already written in the field, just waiting for your permission. You think you want the job, the relationship, the breakthrough, but what you really want is the state they represent. You crave love because you want to feel seen. You reach for wealth because you long to feel free. You chase success because you're yearning for power, not over others, but over your own experience. And that's the key. The thing you want is not the end goal. It's the carrier wave. What you're actually asking for is a vibration, an identity, a version of you who feels a certain way and lives a certain truth. So what if you stopped treating desire as distance and started treating it as direction? Not as something to be ashamed of, but as something to listen to. Because desire, in its purest form, is holy. It's not the voice of your ego. It's the voice of your soul, pointing you to the places where more of you is trying to be born. The moment you stop apologizing for what you want, the moment you stop filtering it through the lens of too much or too late, is the moment you begin to align. Because the universe is not scared of your desire. It doesn't blush at your ambition. It only waits for you to stop resisting what you secretly know is already yours. And no, this isn't about demanding or grabbing. It's not about bypassing the present in search of a glittering future. It's about standing still, placing a hand on your heart, and declaring without hesitation, "This is who I am. This is what I choose. This is what my soul came to experience." That kind of asking has no doubt in it. It doesn't stammer. It doesn't whisper. It resonates. Because desire is not just the beginning of manifestation. It is manifestation in its earliest and most sacred form. When you feel it, you're not being tempted. You're being summoned. So ask, not sheepishly, not with a mask of modesty. Ask with your full chest, with your full voice, with your full truth. Say it clearly. I want this. I am ready. Because the moment you do, the entire field begins to rearrange. Not because you've proven your worth, but because you've finally aligned your frequency with what's already real. It's not about getting what you want. It's about becoming the version of you who no longer doubts you were allowed to want it in the first place. And in that moment, the gap between dreaming and living begins to close. Because now you're no longer waiting for life to grant you permission. You've remembered, you are the permission. And when you start walking like that, with your spine tall, your voice steady, and your desire unburdened by guilt, you start moving in sync with the law itself. So let this be the moment you let go of the sermons that said shrinking is sacred. Let this be the breath where you finally say yes, not just to the outcome, but to the you who was born to carry it. Because the field is listening, and it's only waiting for one signal. The sound of you choosing, without apology, the life that already belongs to you. You've asked. You've spoken aloud your truth, even if only in the stillness of your mind. You've let desire rise in you like a wave, believing, perhaps for a moment, that something greater is listening. But now the silence stretches. Days pass, maybe weeks, and nothing seems to move. This is the part where most people give up. Not because the universe didn't respond, but because they never understood how it speaks. It doesn't reply in the language of noise or immediacy. It responds in vibration. It speaks in synchronicities, in invisible alignments, in rearrangements behind the scenes. It doesn't wait for your words to be polished or your rituals to be perfect. It hears the frequency beneath all that, the essence of your ask, the truth of your feeling. And here's the secret most never told you. The source always hears instantly, not because you're holy enough, not because you earned it, but because that's the nature of the source. It responds not to language, but to alignment. Even if your voice trembled, even if your words were confused, even if you asked through the ache of a quiet breakdown, it was heard. Fully, clearly, without delay. You may have only whispered it. You may not have said anything at all, only a heartbeat trembling with longing, but still, it was received. Because asking is not about articulation, it's about essence. It's not about how you say it, but how you feel it. And once the ask is received, the field begins to move. People shift, timelines bend, events quietly start circling closer. Not because you are lucky, but because the signal has been sent and the law cannot help but respond. But here's where the real work begins. Not in the asking, but in the alignment that follows. Because while the answer may be forming instantly, you can only receive it when you're tuned to the same frequency it's being delivered on. You're not waiting on life. Life is waiting on you to stabilize, to stay in alignment long enough, to not collapse back into fear, to not sabotage the arrival with doubt. And this is where the old patterns creep in. You ask, and then you panic. You pray, and then you rehearse lack. You meditate, and then you spiral into control. You believe for a moment, then return to rehearsing all the ways you're unworthy of the thing you just declared. But vibration doesn't respond to flashes of faith. It responds to sustained frequency. It's not about feeling high for 5 minutes. It's about dwelling in the state of already having. Because if you keep slipping back into the old version of you, the one who pleads, who questions, who doubts, then the answer can't land. Not because it's denied, but because it has nowhere steady to arrive. Think of it like tuning a radio. The station is already broadcasting. The music is already playing. You just need to adjust the dial until the static clears. So ask yourself, are you tuning to trust or to fear? Are you living as one who's already received, or one still begging? Because the moment you shift your state, even just slightly, toward expectancy, toward gratitude, toward calm, the answer rushes closer. Not because you manipulated it, but because you finally matched it. And here's the comfort hidden in all of this. You don't have to repeat the ask over and over. You don't need to kneel harder. You don't need to prove your seriousness. The source did not miss it. The field did not forget. The answer is not late. It's forming. And your job now is not to chase it, but to clear the path inside yourself. To become still enough, soft enough, clear enough to receive. So take a breath. Let go of the repetition. Release the tension in your chest. It's already begun. And what's next is not more doing, but deeper being. Because what you asked for wasn't a maybe. It was a yes, spoken the moment you whispered it. And the only question now is, can you stay open long enough to meet the moment when it arrives? That's not about effort. It's about return. Returning to your center. Returning to the frequency. Returning to trust. Again and again. Because you were always heard. And now it's your turn to listen. Not with your ears, but with your alignment. You asked, and it was given. But between the asking and the having, there is something few are prepared for. The silence. Not the silence of being ignored. The sacred pause of becoming. Most people misinterpret this space. They see the stillness and call it rejection. They feel the delay and name it denial. But in truth, this is the most important part of the entire process. The in-between, the invisible chamber where transformation brews. This is the gap, not a punishment, but a preparation, because you cannot hold what you are not yet ready to receive. Not because the universe is harsh or conditional, but because it is precise. It loves you too much to give you a miracle your nervous system would crumble under. It honors you too deeply to hand over a reality your current self would sabotage. So in this space, where nothing seems to be moving, everything is rearranging. Within you, around you, beneath the surface, life is shifting. People are being redirected. Circumstances are aligning. Your own inner architecture is being restructured to become a match for what you've asked to experience. But the field will never deliver to hands that still shake with doubt. It will not flow into a vessel cracked by unworthiness. It waits, not to tease you, but to tune you. So the question is not, where is my answer? The question is, am I aligned with the version of me who can receive it? And alignment is not performance. It's not pretending to feel good. It's not spiritual theatrics or Instagram mantras. It is the inner coherence between thought, emotion, expectation, and behavior. It is when your entire being says the same thing. It is mine. I am ready. That readiness isn't loud. It's steady. It's calm. It doesn't come from adrenaline. It comes from integration. And integration takes time. So if the answer hasn't arrived, ask yourself, am I living in the frequency of having, or still rehearsing the emotion of lack? Am I walking like one who trusts, or one who is still testing? Am I fixated on how it must appear, or open to being surprised? Because this is where most people delay their own delivery. They ask from a high place, but live from a low state. They meditate in the morning and spiral in traffic. They pray in stillness, but worry in movement. They ask for miracles, but then count all the ways it could go wrong. But the field doesn't respond to bursts. It responds to resonance. It's not about how intensely you ask. It's about how consistently you align. The delay, if there is one, is not in the delivery. It's in the embodiment. And that space, the gap, is sacred. It is the womb where the old self dies and the new one begins to emerge. It is where doubt rises, only to be burned away by awareness. It is where fear tries to anchor and faith gently unhooks it. It is where you learn that waiting isn't passive. It's alchemical. Because becoming the one who receives is the real magic. And sometimes that looks like surrender. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it feels like breaking, only to find that something stronger is being built beneath the cracks. So let the gap do its work. Don't rush it. Don't panic inside it. Just keep returning, again and again, to the truth. I am not being denied. I am being refined. And you'll know the shift has begun when you no longer ask, "Where is it?" but instead whisper, "I am becoming it." Because the field doesn't need you to hustle. It needs you to harmonize. And when your inner song finally matches the vibration of what you've called in, the door opens. Not because it was locked, but because you've finally grown steady enough to walk through without forgetting who you are. So trust the pause, hold the space, and let the answer arrive not as a lightning bolt, but as the moment you realize you've already become the one who holds it. You were never meant to earn it. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that to receive something beautiful, you had to first become something better. That before life could bless you, you had to prove your worth through effort, sacrifice, discipline, suffering. It was never spoken so plainly, but it was there, always. Hiding in the quiet conditions laced into every affirmation. When I fix myself, then I'll be ready. Once I'm healed, then I'll be allowed. But this isn't the law of the universe. This is the language of guilt. And guilt was never divine. You've been walking around with a key in your hand, thinking you needed a resume to open the door. But grace has never asked for credentials. It only asks for permission. Receiving is not transactional. The universe does not operate on a point system. It mirrors your state, not your struggle. It reflects your alignment, not your attempts to deserve. Think of a child dancing in the rain. She doesn't pause to ask whether she's behaved enough to feel joy. She doesn't check if she's earned laughter. She runs because joy is her default, her essence, her right. Now think of you, with dreams wrapped in hesitation, with longing masked as logic, with desire fenced in by delay. You don't receive because you've done enough. You receive because you allow it. And allowance is not weakness, it's wisdom. You've been taught that rest is laziness, that pleasure is indulgence, that receiving too easily makes you ungrateful. But look again. What if ease isn't a bypass? It's a breakthrough. Some of the most blocked people are the hardest workers. They push, they sacrifice, they grind their way through life hoping effort will compensate for a lack of permission. But the law doesn't respond to exhaustion. It responds to energy, and energy doesn't lie. So ask yourself gently, where am I still trying to prove? Where have I told myself, just a little more healing, just a little more fixing, before I'm allowed to receive? The field isn't waiting for your perfection. It's waiting for your openness. It's waiting for the moment you say, I am enough. Not because I've earned it, but because I am. You don't have to squeeze yourself into goodness. You don't have to fast your way into alignment. You can smile. Right now, you can breathe. You can relax your shoulders. You can soften your voice and still be spiritual. You can enjoy your life and still be worthy of more. Because the truth is, grace is not a reward for effort. It's the natural result of remembering. Remembering who you were before you internalized all the noise. Before you learned to associate love with effort. Before you believed that blessings come after suffering. They don't. They come after surrender. Take the story of the man who worked tirelessly for years to create financial abundance. He saved. He invested. He denied himself joy, thinking he was accumulating spiritual points. But wealth remained distant. Only when he stopped trying to hustle his way into worthiness did something shift. He allowed small pleasures again. He stopped tying his value to productivity. And within weeks, opportunities began flowing. Not because he earned them, but because he finally let them in. Or the woman who kept asking for love, but rejected every act of kindness, believing she hadn't yet become lovable. When she stopped trying to be ready and started enjoying her own company, the love showed up, not outside first, but within. This is what receiving looks like. Not a checklist, not a test, but a return. So come back to yourself. Not the edited version, the real one. The one who sometimes doubts, sometimes aches, but still remembers how to choose joy. Let that version lead, because the field doesn't ask if you've suffered enough. It only asks if you've remembered who you are. And when you live from that truth, not loudly, but steadily, you unlock a flow so natural, so quiet. It feels like the world simply shifts to meet you. No fanfare, no fireworks, just a deep exhale, because you stopped chasing, and you started allowing. You stopped performing, and you started receiving. Not because you proved anything, but because you finally stopped trying to. It's not about what you say. It's about what you feel. You can speak affirmations until your throat goes dry. You can write your desires in gold ink on parchment paper under a full moon. But if your inner world is still anchored in fear, in tightness, in a silent scream of lack, the field responds to that. Because the law isn't poetic, it's precise. The universe doesn't read your journal. It reads your nervous system. So when you say, I want abundance, but your body is clenched in worry, the signal being broadcast is fear, not flow. When you say, I'm ready for love, but your chest contracts at the thought of being vulnerable, the frequency isn't readiness, it's guardedness. And frequency is everything. You don't attract what you ask for. You attract what you are aligned with. That's why receiving begins, not with asking harder, but with tuning first. Tuning is not spiritual performance. It's emotional honesty. It's a willingness to drop into the feeling of already having before the outer reality gives you permission. You don't wait for the money to feel safe. You feel safe, and the money arrives. You don't wait for the partner to feel lovable. You feel lovable, and the partner appears. Because your emotions aren't just reactions. They are invitations. They're the frequency signature you send into the field, declaring, "This is the reality I'm inhabiting now." And the field, like a faithful mirror, reflects it back. Not out of morality, out of matching. So what does it mean to tune? It means walking through your life as though it's already done. It means practicing the feelings of peace, joy, and sufficiency, not as fantasy, but as discipline. It means choosing, moment after moment, to feel your way into the version of you who's already living the answered prayer. Not to pretend, but to practice, because practice builds pathways, and repetition builds normalcy. And once it feels normal, the universe calls it yours. Take the woman who prayed for love. She longed for partnership, connection, deep intimacy. But her daily life was soaked in doubt. Every glance in the mirror whispered, "Not enough." Every moment of silence echoed abandonment. No matter how often she asked, her field was filled with, "I'm still waiting. I'm still afraid." Then, something shifted. Not outside, inside. She started dressing not for attention, but for self-honor. She spoke to herself with tenderness. She stopped measuring her value by who called, who stayed, who chose her. She began to feel whole, quietly, deeply, consistently. And one morning, she no longer needed love to arrive, because she had become it, and that's when it showed up. Not because she finally asked correctly, but because she finally matched it. That's what tuning does. It doesn't manipulate. It magnetizes. So pause right now. Ask yourself, what does it feel like to have what I've asked for? Not someday, now. If I were already living it, breathing it, becoming it, how would I stand? How would I speak? How would I walk into a room? Feel that. Not conceptually, somatically. Let that frequency rise, not for show, but for truth. And as you do, understand this. You are not tricking the universe. You are training your system. You are no longer waiting for outer evidence to justify your inner state. You are flipping the law, living from the end so the end comes to meet you. This is not positive thinking. This is vibrational congruence. Because when you stabilize the frequency of having, life organizes itself around your signal. The old reality begins to dissolve, not in drama, but in quiet, graceful exits. The new one forms, not through striving, but through resonance. And you won't need signs to tell you it's working. You'll feel it in your body, in your calm, in the absence of urgency, in the joy that bubbles up unprovoked. Because you've become the one who no longer begs. You've become the one who remembers. And in that remembering, the universe responds, not with applause, but with mirrors, with movement, with doors you never knocked on suddenly opening. Not because you forced them, because you finally matched them. There will come a moment when you feel like you've done everything right. You've asked clearly. You've tuned deeply. You've visualized, aligned, surrendered, and still nothing. No sign, no movement, no breakthrough, only silence. This is the moment that breaks most people, not because the universe failed, but because they mistook quiet for denial. But silence is not the absence of answers. It is often the shape they first arrive in. You see, the universe rarely shouts. It rearranges. It removes what's misaligned. It dissolves what can't come with you. It lets fall away the scaffolding of old identities so that what you really asked for can enter without distortion. So sometimes, when you ask for clarity, your world goes foggy. Not because the answer is missing, but because your old anchors must lift before a new direction appears. Sometimes, when you ask for healing, what arrives first is discomfort, the surfacing of what you haven't faced. Not punishment, but preparation, because you cannot carry the answer into your life if your hands are full of what no longer serves. So when it seems like nothing is happening, look again. Look not at what's appearing, but at what's disappearing. The job that fell through, the relationship that quietly unraveled, the opportunity that passed without explanation. These aren't failures. They are cleanings, sacred subtractions, because the field cannot pour new wine into old wineskins. It cannot anchor the new until the foundation has been cleared. And this is the unseen answer, the one that doesn't arrive with trumpets and timelines, but with space, with shedding, with stillness. Take, for instance, the woman who asked for purpose. For months, she felt abandoned by the universe, lost in a job she disliked, uncertain about the future. No revelations, no big signs, just silence, until slowly, responsibilities began dissolving. Invitations dried up. Even her friendships shifted. It felt like loss, but in that space, vacant and unstructured, she began hearing something subtler. A calling, not from the world, but from within. That's how it works. The silence isn't empty, it's full of rearrangement. And if you only listen for answers in the form of yes or no, you'll miss the deeper language. Not this way, not yet. Something better. So pause here. Ask yourself, what is leaving? What is unraveling? Not to harm me, but to make space. Because sometimes the answer doesn't arrive in your hands. It arrives in your becoming. And if you cling too tightly to form, you'll miss the invisible blessing being orchestrated beneath your preferences. Because true answers don't always confirm your plan. They align you with something deeper, something your soul remembered but your mind forgot. So don't rush to fill the silence. Don't demand fireworks. Honor the quiet, respect the slow. Because in that stillness, the transformation takes root. Not loudly, but surely. And before long, you'll look back, not with regret, but with reverence. You'll whisper to yourself, that season where nothing made sense, it was the beginning of everything. Because the field never fails. It only calibrates. It only waits for you to stop asking for signs and start becoming one. And when you do, you'll no longer need confirmation. You'll walk in the calm certainty of one who knows. I am not being ignored. I am being prepared. There's a point where your asking transforms, not because the old request was wrong, but because you have changed. You're no longer the same person who whispered that first desire into the dark. Something in you has expanded, grown clearer, quieter, steadier. And from this new self, the way you ask shifts entirely. You stop pleading, you stop hoping, you start declaring, this isn't arrogance, it's alignment. Because your request now comes not from panic, but from presence. At the beginning of the journey, most asking is drenched in lack. Please fix this. Help me escape. Give me something to make me feel enough. That's not wrong. It's honest. But it's the voice of someone who believes the answer will complete them, not the voice of someone who knows the answer was always inside. And so life responds gently. It gives you lessons instead of packages. It offers clarity through contrast. It sends delays not to test you, but to refine the you that's doing the asking. Because the version of you who begs is not the one who can hold what's coming, but the version of you who remembers she can. So the field waits, not because it's indecisive, because it knows your true voice is still forming. And then one day, you realize you no longer ask to feel worthy. You ask because you are worthy. You no longer demand change to feel safe. You ask for alignment because peace already lives inside you. You're not trying to escape, you're trying to embody. And that shift, subtle but seismic, changes everything. Now your asking becomes cleaner, simpler, more magnetic. Not layered with conditions, not soaked in fear, not entangled in a performance. Just truth, just energy, just resonance. You begin to say things like, "Show me how to serve through joy. Align me with what supports my expansion. Reveal the highest version of this desire." And those asks move quickly, not because the universe favors the evolved, but because there's less resistance in your signal. You're no longer trying to wrestle life into form. You're allowing life to meet you in your truth. It's the difference between asking from contraction and asking from clarity, between save me and guide me, between fix this and elevate me. Take the man who once begged for a better job. He hated his current one. He resented his co-workers. He asked for escape. But nothing shifted. Then something cracked. He stopped blaming the outside. He started leading from within. He no longer asked for an exit. He asked for alignment with meaningful contribution. He started living that energy now, even before the change came. And it did come, swiftly and perfectly timed, because he had asked again, but higher. Not from fear, from power, from remembering. And this is your moment to do the same. Look at your desires. Hold them gently. Now ask again. Not from the old script, but from the version of you who knows who you are. Ask again, not to grasp, but to claim. Not to convince, but to co-create. Not to get something new, but to embody the frequency of your next becoming. Because now the asking is no longer a question. It is a declaration. It doesn't seek proof. It creates it. It doesn't plead. It presides. You've stopped reaching. You've started remembering. And from here, everything changes. Because when you ask as the one who already is, the universe doesn't hesitate. It rises to meet you. You don't need to ask again. You need to walk as if the answer already lives in your bones. This is the crossing point. The moment when the need to ask dissolves. Not because you gave up, but because you finally stepped into what you were asking for. You don't declare it anymore. You demonstrate it. The prayer leaves your lips and enters your posture. The vision moves from your journal into your gaze. You stop waiting. You begin walking. This is not imagination. It's embodiment. It's not pretending something is true. It's normalizing it in your nervous system. You begin to breathe in a rhythm that matches the life you asked for. Not out of effort, but because it has become the only rhythm that feels true. This is the final surrender, not to life's will, to your own knowing. And that knowing, it softens you, it steadies you, it makes you immune to evidence. Because you're no longer chasing signs. You're becoming the one who carries them. You no longer say, "I hope it's coming." You walk like it already has. And life, true to its nature, shifts to reflect that. Not through miracles that fall from the sky, but through the quiet reorganization of everything around you. The right people appear. The right doors open. Synchronicities become constant. Not because you're lucky, but because you are finally congruent. This congruence is powerful. It's magnetic. It doesn't shout. It draws in. Take the woman who spent years asking for healing. From illness, from trauma, from old stories carved into her chest. She did all the right things. She fasted. She meditated. She asked. But nothing moved until one day she stopped asking. Not out of frustration, but from realization. She began to live as someone already whole. She made decisions from peace, not panic. She moved through rooms like someone who belonged. And one morning, she woke up and realized the pain was gone. Not only in her body, but in the way she thought about herself. The field had responded, not to her pleas, but to her posture. She no longer lived from the memory of the wound. She lived from the frequency of being restored. That's what this moment is about. Not declaring, demonstrating, not hoping, holding. You stop living in the energy of someday. You stop leaking power by constantly questioning. You stop refreshing your circumstances for evidence. Instead, you rise. You walk into each room as if it has already conformed to your becoming. You speak with the quiet gravity of one who no longer doubts. You give thanks, not as a manipulation, but as a mirror of your internal state. And that's the shift the universe was waiting for all along. Because until now, your frequency said, maybe. Now it says already. Until now, your state whispered, I'm still waiting. Now it says, this is who I am. Neville Goddard called this living in the end. It's not about acting. It's not a show for the world. It's not about faking it. It's about becoming it. You stop standing on the outside of your desire, looking in. You step into the scene. You live inside the fulfillment. Not because the external has caught up, but because you've decided the internal no longer needs to chase it. And when you do that, you collapse timelines, because the version of you who receives has already arrived. And life simply obeys. So ask yourself now, not what do I still need to do? Ask instead, how would I live if I knew it was done? And then, live that. Because the moment you do, you've stopped being the seeker. You've become the signal. There comes a sacred moment in every journey when you no longer look outward for the answer, because you've become it. You no longer wait for the signs, because you are the sign. You don't seek validation in numbers, milestones, or outcomes. You don't trace the sky for evidence. You carry the evidence in your breath, in your choices, in the quiet certainty that has replaced your old desperation. This is the shift that changes everything. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's not shared in a social media post with triumphant music and captions that say, "Finally made it." It's subtle, unmistakable. You begin making decisions from completion, not craving. You stop rehearsing the story of one day and begin living from the timeline where it's already true. You don't say, "When I get there." You say, "Here I am." And because that's your state, life must follow. Not because you demand it, but because you finally remembered that life was never leading. You were. You become the frequency that bends the field. And the more stable that frequency becomes, the more seamless your reality starts to match it. This is embodiment. It's not theoretical. It's not spiritual jargon. It's the moment you walk past the mirror and no longer flinch. It's the moment you step into the room and feel no need to shrink. It's the moment you sit with yourself in silence and feel peace. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are finally present. You've returned to yourself, fully. And in that returning, the question dissolves. You don't ask, when will it come? Because you're too busy living it, not in fantasy. In fact, in the way you speak, in the way you breathe, in the way you move through conversations without performing, through dreams without doubting, through setbacks without spiraling, because you no longer need it to happen. It already has. You've collapsed the space between longing and living. You've ceased to chase. You've started to channel. You are the answer, not in concept, but in code. And the field reads that code. It obeys it. Take the example of the artist who once begged for recognition. He poured everything into his work, hoping someone would see him, hear him, validate him, but nothing landed, until the day he stopped trying to be seen and started seeing himself. He stopped painting for praise and started creating from presence. He stopped chasing exposure and started choosing expression. And the work shifted, not in technique, but in tone, in texture, in truth. And recognition followed, not because he needed it, but because his being had become a lighthouse. Steady, bright, irresistible. He no longer sought confirmation. He became confirmation. That's what happens when you stop striving and start standing. When you stop being the one who knocks and become the one who answers. This isn't about self-confidence. It's about self-certainty, the kind that cannot be borrowed, faked, or taught. The kind that rises only through inner attunement. When every part of you agrees, without hesitation. I am that now. So pause. Let that sink in. You no longer need to speak about your desires. Your energy speaks for you. You no longer need to manifest from effort. You manifest from being. The version of you who asked is still in the memory. But the version of you who is, she's in the mirror. She's in the moment. She's the one holding it all without shaking. And as she walks, life rearranges itself. Not as reward, but as reflection. It was never about the words you used. It was always about the who behind them. The one who first asked was sincere, but scared. Yearning, but unsure. Full of vision, but still carrying the residue of unworthiness. That version of you had every right to ask, every right to hope. But they were never the one meant to receive the answer. Because to receive isn't an action, it's an identity. It's not about saying yes louder. It's about becoming the version of yourself who never questioned whether the answer would come. You've walked that path now, through silence and seeking, through release and remembering, through the long, quiet refinement that reshaped your insides to match what you once thought lived only outside. And now, there is no need to stretch, no need to plead. You don't signal need anymore. You signal readiness. That readiness doesn't scream. It doesn't beg. It doesn't apologize. It carries the soft gravity of embodiment. The type of presence that doesn't ask for access. It is access. You've become the open door, and now, life steps through you. Not around you, not above you, through you, because the field responds. Not to your timeline, not to your resume, but to your current coherence. When your words, your thoughts, your breath, and your movement all harmonize into one steady frequency, the field can no longer hold back. Not because it's choosing to bless you, but because there is no resistance left. You've become the landing strip, the clear channel, the magnetic match. This is where miracles stop feeling miraculous and start feeling natural. Not because you expected nothing, but because you normalized everything. You don't celebrate from surprise anymore. You celebrate from recognition. Of course it came. Of course it showed up. Not out of ego, out of equilibrium. You asked. You aligned. You received. Not by chasing, not by controlling, but by becoming. And now, when others ask, what's your secret? You won't give them steps. You'll give them silence. Because the real shift can't be taught. It can only be lived. It's in the way you smile now, the way you sit at peace with the unknown, the way you trust the pause. You've stopped watching the clock. You've stopped refreshing the outcome, because you're no longer trying to get what you want. You are what you asked for. And as that truth settles into your cells, into your spine, into your breath, a deeper remembering rises. The answer was never out there. It was you. It's always been you. You are the vessel. You are the vibration. You are the visible form of the invisible law. The field is not separate from you. It is an extension of your choosing. And now you've chosen, not once but daily. Not with effort, but with clarity. Not with fear, but with knowing. So this is not the end. This is the beginning of what happens when asking becomes living, and living becomes remembering, and remembering becomes power. So walk now, not as one who is becoming, but as one who already is. There's nothing left to chase. The you who once knocked on doors, hoping to be seen, now is the door. The you who rehearsed every line to earn approval, now speaks without flinching. The you who looked to the heavens asking when, now answers her own question with now. This is what receiving truly looks like. Not a grand arrival, but a quiet knowing. A certainty in your breath, a calm in your bones. You no longer live in the house of delay. You've moved into the timeline of inevitability. Not because you figured out how to trick the universe, but because you finally trusted yourself enough to stop running. And now, everything runs to you. Not because you summoned it, because you matched it. This isn't magic, it's alignment. This isn't performance, it's presence. This isn't waiting for a future. It's anchoring the frequency of already. So let this be your remembrance. Every time doubt creeps in, you don't attract what you beg for. You attract what you become. And you've become the one who no longer asks for the light. You are the light. You've become the one who no longer knocks. You open. You've become the one who doesn't hope she's enough. She knows. So as you move forward, walk with this truth etched into your every step. The field is not deciding your fate. It is echoing your state. And now that you are steady, so too is your reality. Now that you are true, so too is your timeline. Now that you are the answer, everything you once asked for comes home. Because you finally remembered, the answer is not out there, it's you, and you've become